Hey there, folks. Welcome to my final part to my refight of Brandywine using GMT's Great Battles of the American Revolution. That's it. I finished the battle in the previous episode. I guess now it's time to wrap it all up and give you my thoughts on the battle. That was pretty spectacular. Actually, going into the final last episode, which was the tail end of turn 9, I kind of was suspicious that if I pushed hard, like I intended to do right from the get-go of the game, right after Howe arrived, I was really going to push hard. Might have been delayed a turn in that effort. But I thought if I did that, it would probably bring a quick end to the battle, considering the Patriots started turn 9. I believe at level 5 on the morale thing over here, which is right here. That's wavering, and they drop substantially. Lots of good success in this British turn here, I'll tell you that. There was success here, which I didn't expect. Yeah, Britain's ford was taken. It's a primary ford. I don't think it's worth any victory points, but that's irrelevant at this point. And got some pinned combats over here. This was not as successful as I wanted it to be. We didn't really do much for the British, that is. The Patriots pretty much held their own. They got this pinned result here. And Kniphausen, basically, he got across, but his combat against that stack really didn't do anything. So that was irrelevant. This combat was a surprise over here. Ferguson's and the Highlanders, 1st Battalion of Fraser's Highlanders, did make the crossing. Put a beat down on the 1st Virginia Regiment over there, Strength 1 Patriot unit, and took that position. So that was pretty cool. Some success there. Didn't result in any army morale drop for the Patriots. It was just a retreat result. Yeah. That said, this fight up here where Howe came onto the board, that was decisive. And like down there, where Kniphausen was, in fact, even more so up here, I really felt like very confident that once the British main units, their grenadiers, the Coldstream Guards, were in a position to attack and surround some of these Patriot units, I was pretty sure it was going to go in our favor and we can get a lot of success in one go. And I think we did that. This was kind of a surprise. Delaware Blues successfully pulling the withdraw tactic and avoided combat. I forget what the Germans were doing. But anyway, it was an NC result, no combat. So the Blues retreated the 1 hex and left the Germans in control of that position. So it didn't really do anything. But I didn't want to resolve this combat. I didn't realize it was Strength 2 attacking a Strength 6 Patriot unit. 1 to 3 odds. That's not exactly in the favor of the British. So we didn't want to resolve that. Unless we had to, of course. And focused instead on this big attack, which again was in the favor of the Patriots, or the British. But the Patriots held out in the fields here. They only suffered a 1-step loss. Being a 2-step unit, it was flipped to its reduced side. So it's a little bit weaker now. But that was enough to demoralize Washington's army. And Washington never got into the fight. I used his stats 1 time for some leadership roles up here, which didn't help. The British cavalry managed to not only capture guns earlier, Patriot guns, but managed to drive off the Patriot cavalry and infantry from this position. And this combat was never fought either. So there's a couple of combats that weren't resolved. But yeah, that was a telling turn. So yeah, the battle ended at turn 9, 4 p.m., maybe 4:30 in the afternoon. The battle had come to a close as Washington and his headquarters decided that, you know what, guys, this is it. We got to fall back and think about Philadelphia at this point. There's too much strength here to deal with. And also remember that the British ended with 2 momentum, which they could have used in combats. Fantastic. And that said, I think one thing about this battle that I probably would have done differently, and I'm sure some of the viewers out there would say the same, is this attack early on. I think it was back in turn 4, right after Green had arrived as a reinforcement with some extra troops. Sullivan released the army, and Green rushed across the Brandywine in this area to counterattack what he thought was the weakened right flank of the British army. He saw an opening over here. If you remember, Maxwell was holding his own. He decided to come across in force, reinforce Maxwell, and bring victory to the Patriot cause by turning the flank of the enemy. I guess he wasn't totally aware of Howe's maneuverings to the north. But regardless, he disregarded Washington's orders to the contrary, did his own thing, and made a grave error. Maxwell was captured, as well as many of his troops, and Greene, after being reprimanded, took the better part of valor and fell back across to the eastern side of the Brandywine. The counterattack failed. And from that point on, I think Knyphausen and I think Grant back here put the pressure on Wayne and Greene over here on this flank. And this is where it ended. In fact, Greene ended up being captured alongside Maxwell and a good portion of the army, actually. You could see them up there in the captured box. This one over here is the eliminated. So there's a lot of troops captured. I think that cost me. If I was to do it again, and who's to say I wouldn't, because you know what? It was just fun to do that. And I feel really pulled into the narrative of the battle, just letting Greene jump the gun, so to speak. Really fun as far as the narrative is concerned. And it challenges me as a player in an unexpected way. Because who knows, that could have really went the way of the Patriots. But it was difficult. The British were just too strong and lucky, to say the least, in this battle. They got the rolls when they needed them, especially early in the fighting and up to the midpoint. I don't know if I would try that crossing again. I think it's better focusing on defense, where the Patriots are really strong in this situation. This becomes an even more difficult task for the British to engage down here and with success, because the defense is so strong and there is a considerable number of Patriots down here, rifles and cannons. That would have been more challenging, I would say. Who's to say, actually? This was fun down here with Gray launching 2 or 3 attacks on Britain's ford, and in the final go, he did actually take it. This is the second time he captured that. That was pretty fun. Wasn't quite sure what to do with Washington. I held on to him as long as possible until, you know what, got to start moving him off that headquarters. Let's head him up towards the north, where Howe is arriving, where I felt the battle would be decided. And honestly, I think it was decided there. Well, it definitely was decided there. The British broke that final unit. And yeah, even if the battle continued here and we resolved these combats, in all likelihood, it still would have favored the British, especially going into the next turn, depending on who had the initiative. It's pretty much time to pull back. I don't know. This is a challenging scenario for both sides. And I think it's pretty balanced regarding that. I mean, for instance, for the British, to get that decisive victory, this is not easy, coming up to Dilworth or capturing that objective on the road up here. Either one would have sufficed to gain a decisive victory at the end of any American turn where I control those hexes. I don't remember if the Patriots can be adjacent to that hex if I do cap. I'd have to look at the wording. But again, it's irrelevant at this point. Very difficult, especially when Howe comes on in turn 7. Gives you 5 turns to overwhelm whatever is here. You have to take Birmingham House if you haven't already taken Proctor's Battery. Otherwise, the Patriots at the end of the game will get their victory. Assuming that you don't capture these positions, actually. Because this gives you a victory at the end of any American turn. The Americans get a decisive victory if they hold both of these points at the end of 12 turns. So actually, this British could actually bypass Birmingham Meeting House and just go for focusing on capturing this. You know, as soon as that happens, it's a win. That's true. But considering Washington moved such a big force up here, that was, I don't know, daunting for me. I knew it was going to be difficult, and I kind of started looking at alternative victories, in this case, substantial victory, and just pound them. And I pretty much decided that in turn 8, that maybe I should focus on that and be happy with a substantial victory, which is the middle ground in terms of victories. There's decisive, there's substantial, and the lowest is marginal, which is where you win through victory points. And which the British would have won as well. I think they're at 20. The Patriots are at 5. So, yeah. And the British morale held up considerably throughout the fight. I think at one point, Patriots were making a comeback. Look at the earlier episodes. Actually, not too early. It was 4 episodes ago. 3. Patriots and the British were in this fatigued zone. The Patriots were making a comeback. It was shortly after Greene had fallen back across the Brandywine to the eastern side, which is this side, and started to regroup his forces. That's what it all, they had a little comeback there. And I started focusing more on defense and so on and so forth. Sullivan really didn't do anything in the battle. He's basically stayed on this position the whole fight. And I don't blame him. I mean, more than half of his forces were sent north under Stirling to greet Howe. So he really couldn't do anything. He left himself in charge of this defense here. And I don't know, he held his ground at the top of that hill throughout the battle. Didn't have to fight much. So this was a fun little distraction, really. Yeah, absolutely fun, folks. If you haven't tried this series by GMT, I highly recommend it. To me, it really is a perfectly balanced game in the sense of realism and feel for the period and playability and fun. It's got all those elements I think we all look for in a game. In my opinion, perfectly balanced. I'm sure some will say, I don't know, this is a little weird, or this result doesn't seem historical. I'm not seeing it. That said, I do have to point out one thing, which isn't a bad thing, but it's very interesting to me. I understand that battles in this era were much smaller than a European battle, and the cavalry doesn't play a big role in all this. But one thing that really fascinated me was how this army morale mechanic is so easily influenced by the capturing or the elimination or the reduction of a combat unit. One unit captured drops this thing. And if it's a personality, a character like Washington or somebody in particular, it can have an even bigger drop in the army morale. But the thing that stands out to me is that almost all the combat results, outside of just a retreat, have an effect on this. It's constantly moving up and down, and it can be devastating, as you can see here. It was in this battle. And it's interesting to me to see how that plays a role. Now, being a smaller battle, I can see how, this would affect units, and word would get around, and it would be easier to hear about the loss of Maxwell or Greene's capturing or something of that nature, or the Coldstream Guards being forced back or captured even. I mean, how drastic is that? I could see how that would play a role, and did actually historically in many cases. But it really stands out as a mechanic in this game, and it's a deadly mechanic, to say the least. But I enjoy it. I actually enjoy that a lot. And it really forces you to be careful and know when to make the big push, to make the big commitment, and to make sure that things are in your favor. Because if you're not sure about something, this mechanic, this game, will make you pay for your mistake, especially in the department of morale, the Army's morale. So that was interesting to me, and I did enjoy that. I also enjoy the results of combat. The fact that units can be captured. There's a distinction there between captured units and units that are disrupted and so on, or shattered. There's a big difference there in terms of how it affects the Army's morale and victory points and all that. I like that distinction. I like that detail. It adds a lot of feel for the period, in my opinion. One thing I'll point out about this battle, that something never occurred, not even one time, was a unit shattered. And of course, a shattered unit is a result that can happen in combat. This never happened. Not that it's rare, I imagine it is actually, but I've actually had this come about and come into play during my practice games, but it never came about in this particular battle. To look at the combat results, I don't think there is a shattered result on here. I think a shattered result comes from when a disrupted unit is disrupted a second time. I think it becomes shattered. I'd have to double check that. And that could be the explanation for that. I'm just not remembering. So, yeah, well, that was interesting nonetheless, because it never did come about. Tactics cards are pretty cool. You can use chits instead. And I probably should have used chits during this series, just to put on the map board to show you guys visually what the units in a particular combat are doing, instead of just saying, oh, this guy did this and this guy did that. It probably would have helped visually. Maybe I'll do that next time. But fun element. When you're playing solo, it kind of slows the game down just a little bit, having to do this. Especially when you're making a video on it. Oh, I got to pull out cards and make some choices. And like I said, for the most part, about 90% of the game, what I did is I just went through what cards were available to that side, and I chose the top 3, shuffled them together, and randomly picked for both sides. And that was okay. So it's random, but it's not too random. It's still based on my what I feel would be useful. And yeah, so the tactics were fun. A couple combats where they really came into play, especially at the end. Getting a nice juicy +2 to combat because of the combination here is helpful. I don't know what else to say. The big thing for me was green coming across with that counterattack. So what do you guys think? You guys that have been following this video series along, I'm sure you've got your thoughts. Even if you're not familiar with the game or even the period, I'm sure you can think of some tactics that you might have adopted for the battle. But that's the great thing. In games like this, even though you're recreating a battle with, this was the result, this is what they did, and so on and so forth, GMT, Mark Miklas, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, Miklos. Fantastic design. The multiple scenarios for this particular battle, I think there's in total 4 different scenarios for this. They're all interesting. They're all challenging. And this, the first scenario, the main battle, I didn't even play with all the options for this. I didn't use the one rule regarding intelligence. It's the final rule. I forget what number it is. Intelligence variant. Rule 6.1. This I didn't use. I didn't think it was necessary when I'm playing solo, but I'd look into it deeper next time perhaps. But I used everything else. So, really good. And the battle could go so many different ways, and there's so many different options to take if you play this same scenario. Scenario number 1 of the 4. This is the first one. Even that one scenario has some choices that you could do differently next time, especially with where troops are coming on. if you go back to the original part of this video, you'll remember I was making choices like, oh, the 2nd and 3rd Brigades will come on here or there, so on and so forth. So there is some variance to your battle just playing this scenario over again. Yeah, I don't know what I'd do differently. This was an interesting choice from the beginning where I had, I think, both the 2nd and 3rd Brigades come on at this point. They didn't have to. They could have come on here and possibly somewhere else up there or something. I don't remember. But I had them all come on here, and I was intending, I did what I wanted them to do. I wanted to move up in this empty zone and occupy with all those guns, which is what they did. And Gray, of course, I think he originally came on at point A over here on this side. You actually can't see where I'm pointing. Right there. I think he came on from here. He ended up coming over to this side, where I think Grant came on from this side, so they kind of swapped. Interesting. Definitely going to play this scenario again. Brandywine is really interesting. And like I said, there's multiple ways to play this particular scenario. There's one here that focuses on Kniphausen's feint. Focuses on his area here. And then we have here Howe's flank attack. So we've got a scenario that focuses entirely on Howe's moving on to the battlefield. At least that's my assumption. I haven't really read these. And then there's this short campaign scenario. Game begins on turn 7 and ends on turn 12 unless a substantial or decisive victory is achieved. This would be interesting. Manifest and Howe's column worksheet. This is that intelligence optional rule that I did not use. That's what this is for. Amusets never came into play for the German units, which is okay. Yeah, great fun. Had a blast. So, folks, I think with the conclusion of this game session, I'm going to pack this away and I'm going to move on to the next game that's going to hit on the table. Probably not this game, Great Battles of the American Revolution. Move on to something new and different. So yeah, this finally I can check off my list this year. I wanted to get at least one game played of this, and I finally did that. So this game has been checkmarked. Still have a few others to check out. But folks, I don't know what else to say. This was great fun, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And I'm still working on a decent format for a presentation of the battles. It's very challenging to sit here and show every die roll and every movement. I would have to do it as a live stream, and that may or may not be enjoyable to watch. So I hope I did a fine job at presenting the highlights of the battle, basically showing you every turn for each side, which I didn't expect to do. I didn't plan to be doing it that way, but it seemed to develop and become that. And I think it was all right. And in some cases, I focused on the rules, showed you the die rolls, the modifiers. I made a few slip-ups here and there, but hey, that's okay. It's all for fun at the very least, right? So I had fun playing this, and it was very enjoyable. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions about this system, let me know. If you catch me slipping up on a rule, I forgot a modifier, well, that's okay. But if you want to point it out, go ahead and leave me a comment and remind me that I forgot to do this or do that. And I'll add the correction to the video, or at least as a pinned comment, so people watching this later can see, oh, that's how it's done. You know, if anything, I hope people could get an idea of what this game is like to play and how enjoyable it is and the challenges it presents you with just the basic first scenario. And I don't want to call that basic because this is basically the full battle. Great fun. Highly recommended. Okay, folks, I hope you enjoyed. Like, share, subscribe. Give me your feedback on this battle. What do you want to see me do next? More Great Battles of the American Revolution? Well, you let me know. I'm sure to consider it at the very least. I hope you enjoyed, folks. I'll see y'all soon. So remember, folks, hang in there. It's only going to get better. You guys take care. Bye-bye.